Hey guys, it's Dirty Jesus here. How's it going? Today is a very special day. We have a guest, Rachael Madori. Before we get to her, though, I wanted to read a psalm, a puss psalm, if I could. Number 77. I cry aloud to God, that he may hear me. In the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. I think of God and I moan. I meditate and my spirit faints. You keep my eyelids from closing. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I remember the days of old and remember the years of long ago. I commune with my heart in the night. I meditate and search my spirit. Will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has his steadfast love ceased forever? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? And I say, it is my grief that the right hand of the Most High has changed. So good morning, good afternoon, good wherever you are, it doesn't matter. Every so often, I think we feel the same thing. Maybe we don't use the broad term God, but we often find ourselves in states where we cry aloud in distress and don't quite understand how and why the world works the way it does and the world treats us the way it does. So survival is a strategy. And so the chat today is about survival strategies. And sure, we'll use the loaded word suicide, but we don't need to dwell on that. My guest is Rachael Madori, mental health advocate and performing arts superstar, a gourmand, if that's the right word, a chef in training, and does a lot of really great advocacy work for a variety of mental health organizations, I think specific to the Los Angeles area. So God created the world in 7 days, but controlling this Skype thing is tough. So let's do the transition. Hey, Rachael, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Let's kill this music. How was my intro? You can feel free to amend it any way that you choose.
Okay. No, that was beautiful.
Cool. So just to let everyone know, the phone lines are not yet open. We're going to chat for a little bit, but please get into the conversation. And if you have anything to say or contribute or questions to ask, 1-866-10-6663, because I like the number 666.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I was like, there's a lot of 666s in there.
Religious iconography is that's my fetish. That's my thing. So I guess I feel like my first question to Rachael, because your blogs are so well written and really gorgeous, and especially maybe at some point I'll read it later, but I've got you now. I don't. People can read it. You have your the letter to friends and family and your partner, sort of about how you were before you were diagnosed or before you realized that you had to make different life choices for survival. So I guess could you take me on a little story of young Rachael to current Rachael in terms of the struggles you faced and how other people might be able to relate to them?
Boy, I'm gonna try and make this short. Yeah.
Big question. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah. So I don't know. I had a really, really good childhood, from what I can remember, up until I was 12, and I have 3 amazing sisters, and it's so weird how my reality is so altered from theirs. Because if you ask them, childhood was great and growing up was amazing and everything, it was good. But I remember distinctly 12 years old was when I just nothing made sense anymore in my mind. I was a really, really angry child. I was constantly self-mutilating. I was constantly having these huge anger issues, these huge depressive issues. And then in return, episodes of mania. And I'm looking back now and I can say those were depressive episodes, those were manic episodes. But 12, 13, 14 years old, you have no clue what any of that is. And I grew up in a time where no one talked about mental illness and no one talked about the fact that you could be sick in the head as opposed to sick physically. And then that kind of just spiraled into just this constant chaos in my mind. And then the first time I ever attempted suicide, I was 14. And then the second time I was 16. And then again at 19 and then 22. So, growing up my whole life, all the adults that were in my life just kept telling me it was a phase and kept telling me that this is something you'll grow out of, which I understand from their perspective because they also were uneducated. They had no clue that they thought that this was just a teenager, acting out. But, when I moved in with my partner and, I was 22 years old and, I tried to kill myself again, he was like, okay, this isn't hormones. This isn't you being a teenager. This isn't, this is something more serious. And even in my head, you know, once I started practicing psychedelic medicine, that was the first time I was ever given an overview of the past 24 years of my life. I don't think I would have come to any of the realizations I have if I, hadn't been using that ancient medicine. Because I remember distinctly one time, in my early 20s when I was, having a psychedelic experience and I basically was just taken out of myself and I was shown my entire life from, the time I was a baby up until that present moment. And all these patterns of being bipolar and having borderline were just shown to me in, a blueprint that I don't think I would have been able to see, especially with my diagnosis outside of myself. So basically now I'm just trying to take the past, 10, 12 years of chaos and not understanding anything that's happening to me and turning that into helping other people not have to deal with that, helping younger kids, which is specifically who I love talking to, kind of figure out what's going on in their heads, so, and now it's so crazy that it's so clear to me now. I'm so clear when I'm having an episode. It's clear, when something is a product of me not being mentally stable as opposed to a product of my personality. Because I grew up my whole life thinking how I was a horrible person because I did all these things and I thought all these things, but they weren't in my control. So my self-image has completely shifted. I've never loved myself more than I do now because I know who I am and then I know what the disease is. And that's a separation I didn't have growing up, which, made loving yourself very difficult.
Did in your psychedelic treatment, I guess a couple questions. Did you initially approach it recreationally? Like was there a period in time where you realized that, just especially something like LSD or acid, like it gets thrown into a generic illicit street drug category where I think it's way stronger. So did you have a journey before you realized the strength and the capacity of it? And then question 2 is, well, in that state and seeing the blueprint of yourself, were those, I'll say, clinical words like borderline personality disorder or bipolar, was there a different way that those energies were expressed to you through the medicine?
Yeah, so the way I got into it was previously when I was a teenager, which is a very common with people with borderline and bipolar, is I was addicted to drugs. I was addicted to uppers. So after I got clean from all of that, I was very much like stone cold sober, wouldn't drink, wouldn't touch anything. And then I ended up meeting my partner who was very into psychedelics and they were a huge part of his life. And I had never in my life experienced them before. And I was like, okay, well, this is different. This isn't something that I was hooked on. This isn't, something that's going to put me back down that path. So I remember the first time I ever tripped with him. And as soon as I realized, what that did to my mind and where that brought me, it wasn't like anything I'd ever done before. It wasn't a drug that was numbing anything. It wasn't a drug that was making me forget, what was going on. It was something that put yourself in front of you and forced you to deal with it. You were forced to deal with how you were feeling that day. You're forced to deal with,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, they wanted you to deal with. And the way I always describe it is to people who don't, or haven't tripped regularly or don't, have a regimen of practicing it is, your whole entire life, all of these events happen to you and they have there's your soul. And then all these events are just putting soot on it constantly, whether it's a bad relationship or just a bad day or,
Mm-hmm.
constantly life is throwing just things on you and it starts to layer and it starts to build and it starts to form this callus. And every single time you have a psychedelic experience, every single time you let these medicines talk to you, it just chips a little bit of that layer away, just slowly and slowly and slowly. It chips it, off. And eventually, once that layer is gone, once that, the impact of everyday life over the past, whatever, 24 years of your life, once that's gone, then you start to chip away your actual soul and you get to get past all these material things and all these, things that your ego is holding on to that have held you back. And then you go even deeper and deeper inside yourself. So it's like just these layers that you're able to access. And I don't think you can access those in any other way. So I didn't know that that's what it would be to me. But as soon as I realized, how they can benefit me, then I treated them with so much more respect after that, and they became such an important part of my life after that. And in terms as to how, the energies of how it showed me I was bipolar and how it showed me I was borderline, is it basically manifested itself as showing me as one person, which is me, Rachel. The drug made it very clear that there was one solid person, and then it would show me all these other personalities, all these different Rachel is the angry one or the violent one or the depressed one or the manic one. I was able to basically see all these masks that were constantly forcibly put on me without my permission because of the disease. And the drug was able to show me that there is, because that's a big thing in my form of identity, because I lose that a lot, because I'll wake up one day and not feel like myself, but I won't be able to stop it.
Yeah.
Even yesterday I
Yeah.
was depressed yesterday, and inside I was like, okay, this isn't me, but you can't, I have to just get through my day. So the drug was able to manifest it in kind of like masks. It's like I would look like I was looking at a wall and there's all these masks, and I don't get a choice of which one gets put on me that day. But what was important to me is at least knowing that I'm still here, and I'm not just in this flurry of different personalities. There's still a core that's there, and I just have to hold on to that, to survive.
What is just I feel like I've read it a million times, but it always seems to drop away. So I'd love to get your definition of what borderline personality means. Does it mean that you have several masks that are distinctly you, and when you wear them fully, so it's hard for you to have a consistent personality, or how would you define BPD?
I think, yeah, I do. I think it's hard to have a consistent personality. It's also, my issue is I don't, it's like you just don't know who you are. Like I said, like it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Like before psychedelics that were able to show me that we're able to find my true self. You just don't know who you are ever. You wake up one day and you're a completely different person than you were before. And then that can turn into, you can be very manipulating. And that's another huge way that people see borderlines. I've even talked to doctors who won't work with people because they're borderline, because they call it, they call it the leprosy of mental illness, because it's known for having very manipulative people and very, unpredictable people. And that's because you don't, there's so many people inside of you, and you don't know who you are when you wake up. And that's really terrifying, and that can lead to manipulative behavior, and that can lead to being a crazy girlfriend that pushes people away but wants you to stay, or you
But it's
know
not. But it's not your fault.
yeah. And
Yeah.
there's this thing called splitting, which happens a lot, which is, if you don't know it's happening, it can drive the people in your life crazy. Like, you splitting is, so either it's black or white. You can either love someone or you hate someone, and you can't see the difference. And that's happened with my partner, who I know I love more than anything in the whole entire world, but I've woken up days where I hate him for no reason. And it's like I've never loved him. It's like the past 4 years of our life didn't exist. And, you know, I'm more so now I'm able to have that, like I said, that sense that the psychedelics gave me of that, okay, this isn't me. This is another person acting. Like this is another person feeling these things. And it sounds crazy, but I have to separate it that way or else I will think that I hate him, you know. And I've done that to my previous relationships. Like I wrote in my blog, you know, I was with amazing men and one day I woke up and I was like, nope, like you don't exist anymore. And then, you know, I ruined a lot of lives by not knowing that that was happening in my brain and just going with it, you know.
Yeah. I once rolled into a hospital and declared that I had narcissistic personality disorder, which has a lot of similarities, I think, to borderline. And the hospital basically were like, well, if you were a true narcissist, you would not have come in here to tell us this. And then they were like, and it's completely untreatable. So even if you do have it, we don't want to talk to you. And it's a very fascinating aspect of the way the medical community works. I think that they've done such a good job at defining the problems, but such a terrible job at any sort of prognosis. But I feel I like your concept about the medicine though. Like, I guess so. A question. So, according to your blog, are you still in a microdosing phase? Do you do it? You're supposed to do it for a while and then go off for a while and go back on, or what's your process?
Um, so I've been microdosing for 2 months now. So I take about like 20 micrograms, between 17 and 20 micrograms of LSD every 3 days. And I've been doing that for about 2 months now. Um, my plan is to continue that for a few more months. That's my thing is I'm afraid to completely stop it because I've known and I've seen what's happened to me when I haven't been on any sort of medicine, whether prescription or psychedelic. Um, so to be honest, I'm going to continue, you know, every 3 days for as long as it seems to be, you know, benefiting my mental state and making my depressive episodes shorter lasting. But I know technically you're not supposed to do it shorter than 3 days apart, but there's people who have varying opinions on that. But yeah, so I microdose every 3 days, and then every couple months, maybe every 2 months, I have a full psychedelic, you know, experience where I'm off work and you know I am tripping for 12 hours because that gives me more of a broad perspective. The microdosing, what it seems to do is make the connections in my brain that the disease isn't allowing it to make, different emotional connections and different just underlying perspectives without tripping, without actually being high, that my brain just isn't doing on its own. And then the full immersive experience, you know, every 2 months or so, that's, you know, for the more profound experiences and for the more self-reflection and kind of just resetting everything completely, you know, to continue for the next 2 months without going crazy.
Do you mix it up into like ayahuasca or iboga or an empathogen like MDMA? Like, are there value to some of the other therapeutic medicines, or what's your logic if you are indeed sticking straight with lysergic diethylamide?
Oh no, love I love the idea that there are so many ways to take this medicine. I mean, I know I have a lot of friends and I know a lot of people that are strictly plant based. It has to be avoga, it has to be ayahuasca.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's people who are strictly it has to be acid, it has to be LSD, you know, and even there are research chemicals that are just as profound and is just as amazing. Like one of my favorites is 2CE, which is a drug that Alexander Shulgin synthesized. Um, so Alexander Shulgin was this amazing chemist who synthesized and tested more than 230 different psychedelics on himself and his wife. And why my blog's name is Sasha, because that was his nickname. Um, but there's so many different psychedelics, and I feel like as soon as people hear the word research chemical, their mind goes to the wrong places. It goes to like bath salts and like all these crazy things that aren't good for you, or if it's made in a lab, it's not a true psychedelic experience. And I don't agree with that whatsoever, because LSD was the research chemical until they did all the research, and now it's just LSD. There's a lot of other substances that are beautiful and have different profound experiences. Like 2CE was one of Shulgin's wife's favorite, and it happens to be one of mine too. And it has this deep connection to nature, and that I've noticed. So I particularly love being outside on that one. And all of them kind of have a different voice to you. So ayahuasca has a different voice, and LSD has a different, that one definitely a really, really deep head trip, and then there's 4-HO Met, which is a different RC, which is very visual. So if you're looking for something more visual and as opposed to, mental, there's so many different forms of the medicine, and it's all medicine as far as I'm concerned. It's all psychedelic, and it's all showing you things that no other drug on the face of the earth can show you.
I'll do a quick book plug. So Shulgin has a book called PCAL, and I think it's an acronym for phenethylamides. I have known and loved, and it's essentially it's a love story. It's a love story of his relationship to chemicals and their capacity and power to do things with the brain. So, hey there.
Yeah,
What's the T stand for?
So tryptamine. Yeah, so it's tryptamines I have known and loved, and then phenethylamines I have known and loved. So they're such good books, and they have all the different experiences in there. And I think one of the favorite things that I read in that book is he's done all the other drugs. He's done cocaine and heroin and all of that, and so have I. And I think it's really cool how he does touch on, there's those, they're cool and all, and I don't judge anyone who does them, but it's just not even comparable, because all those drugs, they're just either giving you something or hiding something, or like making things okay for a short amount of time. And like I said, like psychedelics, those are something that's bringing anything to the forefront. You do heroin or you do cocaine to feel good for a minute. If you trip, you might not feel good for a couple hours because you have some things you need to deal with, and that's what I think is amazing about all the research he did and everything, that all this light that he brought to psychedelics. And I remember reading the book, and so many people are like, okay, you can't keep doing this. Like, you can't work in our lab. You can't do this. And he's like, fuck it, I'll build my own lab. Like, I'm going to spread this, and I'm going to, research it, which has done so much for the psychedelic community.
So I know you're a supporter of MAPS, which stands for Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, run by Rick Doblin. Are you involved with them to any greater degree with your wealth of knowledge?
No. So what I was hoping to go to the psychedelic conference this year, but I wasn't able to.
Me too.
I haven't. I want to go so badly. My
coder. Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
Okay.
We both wanted to go.
Not happy, but yeah. I'll go next year. No, so what I really wanted to do was be in some of the clinical trials they do. That was something they have a lot of resources for clinical trials being done. There was one for using psilocybin to help quit smoking, and I was a smoker trying to quit smoking. And I was like, this is perfect. Like, I've experienced in psychedelics and trying to quit smoking. This is great, but what's not their fault and what is a shame is a lot of these clinical trials that I would love to be a part of and to, give my voice on, a excerpt or a whatever it's called. An exemption is you can't have a personality disorder, so you can't have a mood disorder. So if they're trying to see if psilocybin can help you quit smoking, you can't be diagnosed with bipolar, you can't be diagnosed with borderline, which I understand, because they don't know how psychedelics are affecting people with mood disorders, and no one really knows. I don't know how I would even get involved with them to talk to them about that, because obviously I'm not going to ask them to put a bunch of bipolar people, on acid, because no one knows how it's going to affect them. The only reason I'm able to do it is because I've been, experimenting with it for 4 years. But I don't know how I would get more involved with them, but, I think I would love to. They're doing so many amazing things.
So I had to not tell a clinical environment where I did iboga also to quit smoking, which didn't really, well, it worked for a while. But I had to not tell them about my psychiatric diagnoses. And I, I found the experience to be really, really negative in terms of what I felt like the medicine wanted to do to me versus the environment and the constantly checking my blood pressure and like somebody watching over me all the time. So I'm sort of like, I'm split on the issue because I feel like I don't believe that anything that we can put in our mouths should be illegal. So this notion of what's licit or illicit doesn't matter to me. But I'm comfortable that if people can, the issue is, can people find a substance that is sufficiently pure or unadulterated that they're not going to have a negative experience and blame the drug when they weren't actually even taking the drug. So I feel like that's the value of the chemistry that would come from a lab, is you're assured of what you're getting. But otherwise, I feel like, I don't know, like, do you think it's been more meaningful to be in the real world or in safe spaces with people you either care about or don't care about or feel comfortable or uncomfortable in terms of going on trips that wouldn't necessarily work in a lab?
Um, I've never been in a lab setting, so I didn't even think about, how that would I mean, yeah, I think that would be different, because when me and Zach trip together, there are profound things happening between us, even as a relationship, things that I think that's my thing, is every couple should trip together, in my opinion. Every single couple should trip together and experience that together. Stop it. Sorry.
The dog is tripping. The dog is tripping. Everyone relax. We'll be back to our scheduled programming.
Yeah. I think it's important in your environment. I think it's important who you're with. It changes the conversations you're having. It changes the dynamic. And I don't know, maybe what it would be in a lab setting. Maybe if like you had a blindfold on and like you were just laying there by yourself and like you didn't see anything. Because I feel like if I was being watched, I would think I would feel freaked out, and it might take away a little bit from it. I think it definitely depends on your environment. Even if they did studies, maybe have someone you trust there to just be with you, while you're going through that. Because when Zach and I trip, I always have a moment where I need to go away because I need to be alone, and I need to be alone with my thoughts, which is sometimes terrifying when you're on a psychedelic, but I think the environment makes a huge impact. That's why everyone always says, don't trip with people you're not comfortable with. You don't go somewhere you don't feel safe. It's just you're not getting the full benefit of the medicine if you're not, somewhere safe or somewhere comfortable.
Mm-hmm. And then sometimes you might think you're in a space of comfort, and the drug helps you realize that you're not, in terms of who you're with or where you are. And while that can be difficult and particularly challenging, like I've had personal experiences where that's a mountain to climb, but if you can get over it, you feel a lot stronger for it. So it's the sort of the truth that the medicine provides can also be very enlightening in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could be with a group of people and then, you go through your experience and realize that that's not the place you're supposed to be. And, all you can be is thankful for the medicine and what it shows you. Because it all comes from inside of you. Nothing's fake. There's no propaganda there. Everything is coming from somewhere with significance. Which is why I trust it, and I think more people should.
So one of the things that you spoke about in your blog was that the microdosing has, from your own perspective and analysis, demonstrably reduced your sort of suicidal ideation. And one of the aspects of this show that isn't overly utilized, but I'm going to keep it alive, is it's an internet radio call-in show and a suicide hotline. Because my feeling is that most crises where one questions whether or not they should continue to be, which is a truly autonomous human decision that everyone has the right to make, but it usually happens very insularly, and the voice in your head ends up taking control. So having a suicide hotline is just a space that if anyone wants to leave me a message, talk offline, talk online, it doesn't matter. So what I'd really love to to the level of your comfort. I don't want you to just sort of drag anything up that you don't wish to, but for the benefit of the viewers, I'd sort of love to understand how the suicidal ideation, what it sort of means for it to be reduced, and having attempted suicide in the past, what sort of daily work you have to put in to that someone who hasn't had suicidal thoughts might not have to do. I can re-ask that question if it wasn't clear. Suicide? Question mark.
Suicide. No,
Ampersand.
So it being reduced. So the ideation and the attempts are reduced because I think people, because it's a lot of people don't talk about it. I think people underestimate how often someone either with bipolar or borderline wants to kill themselves. Because people joke about it, be like, oh, I had a bad day, I want to kill myself. For me, it was just an obsession, just it's constant obsession. I would feel like I would have to do nice things for people constantly, not to be a nice person, but because I'm going to be dead soon and I need them to, realize that I did care about them before I'm dead because my time is limited. That's all I just kept thinking, And it's, I have to even work on it myself because I'll say things that are very fucked up to other people that in my head are normal. Someone, whether it's at work and I'll be like, oh, well, I want this at my funeral, or like, just very morbid things that, people think I usually take that I'm joking, but I'm not, which is really sad. But yeah, it was just this obsession, just an obsession. It's all I could think about. And it just was such a normal part of my life. And I got to this point where I just accepted that that's how I'm going to go out one day. And, when I started microdosing, those thoughts were more infrequent. It wasn't as much as an obsession. I could see myself, living past a few months, a few years. And I still no doubt think about it, especially, when I do get a little depressed, but it's nowhere near as debilitating as it was before. It's not a thought I have as soon as I wake up in the morning. It's not something, I fantasize about when I'm trying to cross the street. And I don't know what of the drug has reduced that, but it has greatly.
It's a great verb, by the way, fantasize. I think that's a really, because it becomes such an encompassing world that you want to step into that ironically doesn't have you in it. You can draw it out so vividly and so thoroughly, and your mind becomes absolutely preoccupied with that. There's a line from Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying. And I think, people do not respect the amount of brain energy that is put towards the sort of the planning for not being around, the need to not be around. Did you have, when you were younger, did you have anyone? I mean, as we discussed, the notion of mental illness was not as open a topic or sort of at the forefront of people's minds or clinicians' minds. But at any of your stages, did you ever have anyone to talk to? Were you unsuccessful in communicating? Did you maintain insularity?
I love my parents, and we're on a very
we all love Dad.
I do. I love them to death, and they to this day blame themselves immensely for everything. Because now I'm very open about it. They see me Advocacy. My younger sister, she also, whether she's too young to diagnose right now, but she is exhibiting a lot of the signs that I did, but not as bad because she's getting help now and she's able to talk about it. She has me to call. She has a therapist to talk to. It's not this hushed subject that nobody knows anything about, which I'm grateful for. And all I care about is that she gets taken care of. I don't care about what happened to me when I was a kid. I don't care that, my parents, weren't educated on it. Mm-hmm. But no, I didn't have anyone to talk to. Not that people didn't know, because everybody knew. Everybody knew I was self-mutilating. Everybody knew I tried to kill myself. The first pizza. So the first time no one knew when I was 16. Um, I grew up shooting. It's been a hobby of mine forever. I choose not to own one because I don't trust myself to own a firearm. But, I took my mother's, 357 revolver and I went out into my, backyard in the woods in New Jersey and I sat there for hours just with the gun in my mouth trying to pull the trigger. And I didn't, I guess I just decided not to, or I found the strength to walk out of there, or I couldn't fucking work the gun properly. And all I remember is I walked inside and I was crying my eyes out, like 16 years old, and I just handed my mom the gun because I didn't know what else to do with it, and she was just like, that was stupid of you. And I was like, yeah, I know. And I just, walked away and we never spoke of it again. It was never mentioned again. And I think it's because, again, she was living in this world where that's just a phase. That's what a 16-year-old girl does when she's upset, if she thinks she's upset over a boy. And looking back now, hindsight, she's like, what the fuck? Like, I should have seen this, but, and I know my school counselors knew I was hurting myself and they, wanted me to get therapy, but, my family said that I didn't need it. And like I said, I was just being a teenager. And then my other suicide attempt, my parents didn't know until long after the fact when they actually opened up about it. And then what happened, 2 years ago, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my fiance's parents when I went to their house on Christmas and my arm was all wrapped up because I slit myself open. I just kept lying and said I sprained it. Even at that point, I was still lying. Like, I still wasn't telling anyone that I was doing this. The only person that knew was Zach, and it's because he found me and he had to, get me to a hospital. So even up until 2 years ago, like, it's just, I wouldn't talk about it. And I thought I was okay. I thought this was normal. I thought everybody did it, which is a really fucked up world to live in, to think that everybody's constantly trying to kill themselves.
But no one's talking about it to each other.
Yeah, but
Wow.
like,
But that's how you grew up. Like, what other mindset could you have but to assume that others are like you? So
every single person was like this, and it was weird. And I had a lot of resentment for my older sister because she seemed happy all the time. She had friends and she went out and she had whatever, she had a good time and she seemed happy and she seemed normal. And I started to resent people that were normal. I started to resent people that were hiding it better than me, because I thought everybody went through this. I thought everybody lived with this, turmoil. And then when I found out that it's just something that I'm born with, I was like, well, fuck this shit. Like, I was dealt this hand that I don't want to deal with it. And my dad feels a lot of guilt because I got it from him and he feels very guilty about this. I've made a personal decision myself to never, have children because of it, because I will never, put someone else in the risk of genetically, being born with this. So no, I grew up with people to talk to, but no one was talking, if that makes sense, which is why I'm so adamant about talking to kids specifically, especially with the AFSP. Like, I want to go through the training to go into high school specifically and talk to high school students, because I keep thinking, like, maybe when I was that age, if someone was like, this isn't normal, like, you need to talk to someone, maybe that would have saved me, from the drug addiction. Maybe that would have saved me from other attempts. It would have saved me from, not for going without therapy for so long. It's just so important, especially to talk to kids when this stuff starts manifesting and when nobody gives them credit. Like a grown woman says, I'm suicidal, like, I need help. People respect that more than, like I said, a 16-year-old handing you a gun because she just tried to shoot herself. People aren't giving kids the benefit of the doubt when it comes to this.
yeah. So what's the question? I guess one question is, is there pushback from the school systems? I have Dirty Jesus is not allowed anywhere near schools. No, that's not true. I'm allowed. I just choose not to go. I'm just curious if the notion of you're always worried about stigmatization, or even, or I guess that bringing it up creates a presence in people's minds. So are the schools concerned about that? And then I guess this second question would be, are there unique stresses, the internet or something like that? Are there any things that you're noticing that are coming up in people who are admitting that they're young and suicidal that is very distinct from your experience?
There's definitely pushback from the schools, which just infuriates me. And I'm
Yeah.
lucky that I'm never in the room with, a superintendent or someone making that decision, because I don't think I would be able to control my anger with being so infuriated with them, because their reasons are, if you talk about it, they'll think about it and you'll get a lot of our kids killed. And that's like a mentality that blows my mind, because the reason these are dying is because nobody is talking about it.
Yeah.
It's not like
Yeah.
we're going to go in there and we're going to mention it. Everyone's going to be like, oh shit, like, I need to kill myself. No, these kids who are having these feelings are going to be able to realize that there's outlets, there's places to go, there's people to call, but there's this massive pushback, especially from public schools, that just don't want anyone coming in and talking about it, which is it's just backwards.
They're afraid you're gonna like show them how to tie a noose properly or
Yeah,
something.
that's the way they're afraid that we're gonna come in there and talk about it, and then this light bulb's gonna go off in all their kids' heads, and they're gonna try and kill themselves. And that's like, that's not you're giving them an outlet. That's the thing, is these kids who do have these feelings. There are so many kids who have these feelings, and whether it's because they have a mental illness, or because they're just depressed, or because they are going through something really difficult and they don't see any other way out, whatever the reason is for wanting to kill yourself, knowing that there's somewhere to go and knowing that there's someone to talk to, that can greatly reduce it. Like I said, if I knew that I could have just called someone or did something, like maybe I would have done that. I think my case, and I think some cases are a lot different, because you know in my cases of suicide attempts, it wasn't a choice on my part, and that's just the aspect of it being a disease. Is because my suicide attempts, I lose control, so I can't stop it, and I can't make a decision that's like, okay, I'm killing myself because I'm upset. I completely lose control of my body, and I just am like screaming from the inside, like, no, don't do this, but I'm doing it anyway, and it's scary to watch that happen. But maybe even people that are dealing with that, like even a last ditch effort, you might be able to call someone. But if you don't have any idea that there's resources for you, then no, you're screwed. And the fact that the schools are pushing back against it is just, it's so infuriating. And they're getting more kids hurt by not, bringing in people to talk about it, and not bringing in people who are qualified to, teach signs of suicide or teach preventative methods. It's really infuriating.
The difficulty for me, I guess I'll call it the moat, the castle moat with alligators in it. And I've personally experienced it, and I have watched it happen with friends who did end up committing suicide. It's at a certain point, it's like once your mind has decided, once the fantasy has become so vivid and real in your head that it's almost, even though it's not going to happen the next day or the next day or the next day, or it may never happen, it's almost like full steam ahead. You have tunnel vision. At that point, it's like no one wants to talk about anything. So I'm really just having an anonymous hotline. Like I hesitate to say it's almost like just talk your grand suicidal plan outside of your head. It doesn't matter whether you're going to activate it, and it's not coming from a place of judgment for me. I am no substitute for calling 911, but that comes with its own trappings. I'm just that's my biggest concern is that it really wraps people it wraps people up in a way that they choose not to explain, and they almost feel empowered. I think it's maybe similar to sort of cutting or anorexia, taking control of how and what you do to your body, even though it's damaging. Do you think there's a correlation there?
I
I'm
mean,
trying to.
I do think there is tunnel vision, and it is, and you're right. Maybe, maybe if someone just talked and just said their plan out to someone else, maybe that would make something click, and it would stop someone. I don't. I feel like that's my weak point is I don't know what it's like for other people who are suicidal because I don't know what it's like to be suicidal because something bad has happened to you or because you've lost everything, and I don't the only thing I can do in that situation is talk to somebody and, get them somewhere where they would be safe or watch them or, just keep the conversation going until, hopefully they got professional help or just to get them out of that tunnel vision. I think that's like the main goal is to just get them away from that like main goal, like just look at something else, focus on something else. I think that's what you would have to do. And I mean, that's why hotlines are amazing. And, that's why the AFSP has this thing called Talk Saves Lives. So it trains you in learning, the signs of people who are suicidal and then just like, how you can guide them away from it or how you can, suggest help for them. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to get them away from this tunnel vision and away from this, okay, this is it. Like you know, this is just what I'm gonna do. And I
Where
mean,
does
it's just so tricky. Like it's
Yeah.
just how do you, technically it's our choice, but it's just
Where does the AFSP stand on psychedelics? Like, do you sort of live in two worlds where you almost want to have to promote it clinically with the work you do there, but your personal work? Like, is there
yeah.
when's the crossover going to happen?
I kind of it depends. So like I don't know like the AFSP stance in general on it, because I know like obviously they want you to see a doctor, which I agree with, and it's just you have to find the right doctor because I've had doctors that flat out said you work with psychedelics, I'm not going to talk to you, and I was like okay, goodbye. And then I've worked with ones who have tripped before and they're like I totally understand why you're doing this, like let's continue therapy. And I was like, so they definitely want you to go a clinical route, and getting help and seeing a therapist and possibly being on medication, but there isn't. I'm going to go ahead and say that they just don't have a stance on it because I've talked to a lot of people there who are very for like the ketamine clinics, which are amazing and doing amazing things, for depression and alcoholism and for, mental illnesses. So, and then the ketamine clinics working kind of flows into, psychedelic medicine and psychedelics working, and people are starting to see that there might be more viable options than prescriptions, and it's like slowly happening. But yeah, I live in like these two different worlds where I have like my psychedelic advocacy and my blog and everything like that. But when I work with the AFSP, that's not a section of theirs that's there because I think there and
Take two tabs and call me in the morning, right?
yeah, like that's I can't do that with them. But they're more about like prevention, they're more about education, they're more about advocating for, mental health rights in the government. It's more about knowing about it, supporting people who have lost people, so suicide survivors, their family members, knowing that there's a place for them too. Because a lot of people don't think about that as an aspect of the AFSP is most of the people I meet, they're not people who have attempted suicide. Most of the people I meet at events, it's people who have lost people. There's this whole group of moms and dads and friends that don't know what to do because they felt like they could have done something and now, they're gone. So honestly, the majority of the people I meet at events, the majority of people I talk to, they're all people who have lost someone. I feel sometimes I'm kind of the weird one because I'm the person that like is still here that did what their loved one did. And sometimes I feel guilty, because I'll talk about it. And, I did this public speaking thing with a lot of these parents. So there was just a room full of parents who lost their teenage kids, 16, 14, these young kids. recently too, I spoke to one gentleman and his daughter killed herself or died by suicide 2 months before my talk. And I just didn't even know how he showed up. And I felt guilty sitting there because my parents were there as well. And I get to sit there and tell this story, and none of their kids get to do that. So I feel kind of guilty, but I also, a lot of them, and it was so weird, they lined up afterwards and they were asking me all these questions because I was like this weird outlet to something they didn't understand, okay, what do you think, my daughter was thinking before she did it? And I was like, I can't answer that, but
Which
like,
is
I
a
can tell you.
crazy line of thinking for you to be
Yeah,
put into. Fuck.
yeah. But, and I'm in contact with some of those parents still because, it took some of the guilt off of them
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's not ever anyone's fault that someone kills themselves. It's not, especially, and then parents is the biggest thing. Even my parents are very lucky that they get to feel guilty and talk to me about it. Can't imagine feeling guilty and they're gone. So that's a huge part of the AFSP. That's the majority of the AFSP from what I've experienced with just our walks and stuff. It's the people that you don't think about. It's the people that are already, dealing with someone who's gone. But psychedelics doesn't really transfer into that. I mean, if when I meet people and they talk to me and they ask me what my how I'm doing and how I'm, doing, not attempting anymore, I'll bring it up and I'll tell them that that's my regimen. Even people at work, they'll, because at this point I've worked with them for so long, they know I'm not fucking normal, and they know that I microdose, which, there hasn't been any backlash for, even though it's technically illegal, but I bring it up any chance I can because I want to talk about it and I want it to be normal, you know.
Let me hit you with a compliment if I can. I know that a lot of personality disorders end up coming with very negative labels, especially in terms of manipulative is the term that you use. But I think the one thing that's often missing is that not always, but with great degree and skill and facility, people with personality disorders can be highly empathic because they can almost literally become the other person. So the work that you're doing with the AFSB sounds phenomenally difficult, but phenomenally important. And I just want to extend through the internet gratitude that you have the strength within yourself to be that object for other people who've lost someone, or again, ideally people who we need to catch before they fall off the cliff that they design themselves. So, anyways, so you're not screw that diagnosis. I say, screw those doctors. Do you mix the psychedelic with anything pharmaceutical, or are you completely free and clear of any doctor prescribed meds?
No prescriptions. And that's my huge thing is I don't want anybody with a mental illness or a mood disorder or a severe, mental disease. I don't want them to think that I don't think they should be on prescriptions because there are some diagnoses that I don't know if I'm not a doctor. I don't know if psychedelics would help schizophrenia. I don't know if psychedelics would help, so many other disorders. I'm not writing off pharmaceuticals for other people in their journey because I can't do that because I'm not a doctor. What I can say is it's a personal choice for me not to be on them. The ones I've been prescribed are dangerous. They basically I would have to choose between my physical state and my mental state. Like, yeah, okay, I would have mental clarity and be sort of normal, but, it would be toxifying my blood or it would be, slowly deteriorating my joints. It's not I don't want to go down that path. And because I'm experienced in psychedelics, I've chosen not to go down that path. But like my family members that are on prescriptions, I don't judge them and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just want everyone, to feel, I just want everyone to feel better. And I think that that's a huge misconception. But I'll get a lot of emails, people are like, this is dangerous. You shouldn't be telling people to go off meds. You're like some alternative medicine freak. And I'm like, I'm not against prescriptions. I'm against prescriptions for me. That's my choice. But under no circumstances, I know 100%, do you ever mix it? I don't care if you're on lithium or Prozac or any, just you can't mix psychiatric medicines and psychedelics. It's extremely dangerous. And it's just not recommended at all. Like that was my choice when I was prescribed lithium. I had a crossroads. I had to decide to be on lithium for the next 3 years and completely never touch a psychedelic again, or see if microdosing, would make an impact that I could deal with and have, a regimen for it. But definitely, under no circumstances should me or anybody else mix psychiatric medicines with psychedelics. Like my baby sister, who's on prescriptions right now. When she's older and when her brain is done developing and when, you know, she's ready, I would like to trip with her and have a psychedelic experience and figure out what, is causing these things that are happening to her brain that are very similar to me. But she would have to cycle off meds for that. And that would be something that would have to be done under the supervision of her doctor. Is mixing prescriptions and psychedelics is just, it's something I've been asked about a few times, and it's always no, every single time. It's too dangerous. It's the way they work with your brain. It's very, very dangerous to mix those.
Okay, so then hang on, I just gotta do a direct address here. Pharmaceutical industry, step up for whatever dumb reason that you have decided that people in higher, like what is high risk? That doesn't even make any sense. I think you should consider these medicines. The state of Oregon has started to reduce from felony to misdemeanor possession of all of these drugs. The third wave is moving. The awareness is starting to happen. You guys need to step it up. And in whatever controlled environment you want to put a bunch of crazy people together, hang on, crazy, that's a bad stigmatizing word. I mean crazy in the most loving sort of ways. Like where did you decide that you couldn't use any of these medicines that far outlast the entire pharmaceutical industry? I get so angry at pharma. Sorry. Go ahead.
It's so infuriating because we have these medicines. So LSD has been proven to cure alcoholism, iboga, drug addictions. Ketamine helps with depression. I've done ketamine for depression, and it gives you perspectives that you can't have. And these drugs don't have adverse physical side effects. Okay, like you do plant medicines, you get nausea, or you purge, or you do LSD, and yeah, you're not going to be doing anything for 12 hours that requires you to like be super functional. But all these medicines, you take like my friends who just sprinkle some psilocybin in their tea in the morning and it greatly improves their life. I think people should microdose who don't even have a mental illness because it makes such an improvement to your life. And just, they're at these pharmaceutical companies' disposal and they know they work, but they're not doing anything about it. And that's because we're backed by decades of propaganda against it. I had someone come up to me yesterday and asked if LSD fucks with your spine. And he was like, yeah, my mom told me like it ruins your back or something. Like this is decades of like completely 100% believed propaganda, which is obviously setting pharmaceutical companies back from caring about it, and it's setting us back legally from being able to study it. And pharmaceuticals make so much money, they will never go after what actually works for us. They're never going to go after what's making people healthier and happier. They're going after what makes them more money. That's just the way they work, and I think that's the way they're always going to work, and that's why we have to do this ourselves.
Yeah, get out of our brains. You know what? The first time I heard of acid, before ever trying it, I was like 13 or 14. They said, if you do acid, you can never be a pilot because the acid never leaves your spinal fluid. And
yeah.
I haven't thought of that in years, but I just realized like that was my first introduction. And it's like, where did that fucking story come from?
I went onto a .gov site, a government supposed to be educational.
A government propaganda website? Yeah, sure. Tell me more.
Drugs. And it was like drugfreeamerica.gov, something like that.
Yeah.
And there was like a blurb, and it's got like a picture of this lady, and it said, I can't forget it because people, like older people or young people who believe everything they read, would probably go on this and be like, oh my God, they're right. Like this is an official website. And it said, I got addicted to marijuana when I started popping LSD pills. And I was like, first of all, where are you getting into pills? Because that's amazing. And second of all, so I never heard of LSD pills or popping them leading to smoking marijuana. And it was just this whole conflict, like this horrible, just didn't even make sense, was completely fake and just bullshit. But it's you remember Dare? Did you have Dare when you were in school? They said weed was bad. They said they didn't even talk about psychedelics at that point. Like, yeah, coke and heroin and all that, but that's the weed. Like, for 10 years I was pounding in my head that weed is bad. And I don't smoke weed because I personally don't like it. It makes my anxiety worse. But I'm all for it.
One of the reasons, sorry, let me jump in. One of the reasons why the schools are afraid to talk about suicide within a school context is actually because of DARE. Because DARE would come in, show all these drugs that you're not supposed to do, and it would almost unilaterally cause people to go and do those drugs. So it was the failure of DARE that is in part providing the catalyst for why the schools are reticent to allow suicide to be discussed, or general, forget suicide, like general mental health and well-being, like being able to be open when you don't feel right inside. It's as simple as that. And if the fact that you're getting pushback from schools, like, you know what? I think one lesson I've learned from psychedelics is that most of the systems around us are here to crush us, and human liberty is a gorgeous thing, and damn, it needs to be fought for, though.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
And it's starting at such young ages. Like, my little sisters, I have two little sisters. They're very lucky, in my opinion. I know this sounds, narcissistic. They're very lucky to have me in this aspect. They're very lucky that I send them these articles about drugs. They'll call me when they learn something in school about drugs or about mental health, and they'll call me and be like, this is what they said. And I was like, yeah, okay, so they're starting at a young age fucking you up. Like, this is how it really is. And even my dad, finally got his medical marijuana card, which, was a huge deal to him because, he just wanted to go by the books. He wanted to be legal. But it helps him so much. And just recently was the first time, he hit a bong in front of my little sisters. And of course, my little sisters' minds are blown. They're like, this is my dad. Like, he's awesome. Like, he's an authority figure, but he's smoking weed. I don't understand what's happening. And it was very cool for them to see, like, it helps him and it's a medicine and it doesn't make him sick. And, that was a very cool crossover from, the parents I grew up with, which was like, don't smoke weed, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. When now, they're open with my little sisters and, my dad can roll a joint and be like, I'm going to go smoke, my medicine because it helps, with, how sick I am, but even still in schools, like they're still treating weed like it's bad. So of course they're going to treat psychedelics like they're evil and they're horrible, or even, MDMA and all that, which is a whole different story, but is also, being researched to help with relationships and, depression. But, it's starting so young, and they're just making kids stupid at this point. They're making kids stupid and dangerous. Their kids are more preferable to go try heroin than to just go smoke a fucking joint, because they're just pressing the wrong drugs, and I don't know. The school, I'm very angry. School systems, I'm very angry about what they're doing to our generations. I'm very angry about how scared and how uninformed these kids are growing up, because then you turn into an adult and you're like, what? I don't know what's what.
That's why I think I'm starting a cult, is because there's no, and by cult I don't mean anything bad. Cult is just a culture, an environment and space where people can learn and ideally be themselves in a non-obtrusive way. I just find it ridiculous. Do you know about the MK Ultra program? So when they had acid, they had Delicid, and the CIA had it in the 1960s. And the CIA went nuts. They would put it in each other's coffees. They would give it to spies. They wanted to see how much they could crack. And so it had government authorization. And then because of Timothy Leary did this psilocybin project with the prisoners, and like hardened multiple murder, absolutely like beyond reproach people, turned into empathic kittens who understood what they had done and wanted to give back to the world. So they were just at about this point where they were going to start giving doses of LSD to politicians while they were active politicians, to see ways in which that might change sort of strategic understanding of people. And because Timothy Leary, sometimes a great guy, but sometimes an absolute dick, decided to go off on his benders and just cause so much anarchy that it frightened people about the drugs, they canceled the political program. For me, I think like I almost feel like acid needs to be in the water supply. Like if you're going to fill us full of fluoride, like let's give Flint a bunch of acid now and see if that can build some. I mean, I'm not promoting this. Please, FBI, like you can come visit, but let's just have tea.
Yeah.
Because I think like doing acid alone, doing any psychedelic drug or doing anything that even at some point in your brain has the notion of being illicit, I find that negative. I don't want anybody to have. So people should not have those sort of mindsets coming into anything. So that's why I think that just putting it in the water supply, I can't even imagine. I feel like that would be awesome.
I'm one of those crazy people. I'm just like, what if we just like put a little bit like in a helicopter and like just flew over, because it is amazing. It does so many amazing things, and it's just in low doses it impacts people's lives, right? Like even to the point where like I think, my mom her whole life has been terrified of the idea of psychedelics, and when she's seen what it's done to me and how it's improving the few years, she's like, hey, like if I come out and visit, like do you think like we could trip? And I was like, yes, of course we can. Like I'll facilitate this whole thing. It'll be beautiful. It'll be amazing. Like, it's just I think everybody in their life, once their brain is done developing, I think that they should trip, because in my opinion, even as a Christian or whatever you want to call it, because I don't like organized religion, I think that our natural state is a psychedelic state. I think our natural, what we're supposed to be, is in a psychedelic state. The state, this overstimulated, you could look at someone and feel their emotions. You're understanding things that normally you don't understand. You appreciate, a leaf more than you would ever appreciate it. I think the entire psychedelic mindset is what we're supposed to be at constantly. But for some reason right now as a society, we can't handle it. And eventually I think one day it will be given back to us, and one day we will be able, whether it's after we die or, we will go back to that. But I think that the psychedelic mind state is what we're supposed to be in as a human race. You put a bunch of people in a room that are tripping together, it's not usually a bad time. It's usually very creative and very conducive to learning, and it's inspiring. And you learn a lot about yourself, and you learn so much about other people. I think if everybody was in that state, the world would be a completely different place. But I don't think the universe thinks that we're ready for that. We're like babies. We don't get it. We don't, we're not ready as a selfish society for that. But I truly believe that when I'm tripping, that's what my mind is supposed to be like. That's the love and the compassion, the creativity, and the self-reflection that I'm supposed to have, normally. But we just, as a society, we don't have that yet. I don't think we deserve it right now, because
really?
Pretty
I look at it as like self-awareness. Like I feel like when in a psychedelic state, my body is no longer, and self-awareness almost becomes group awareness. And so I guess the hook for me, like, because I like to think about human development and evolution, because I feel like there was definitely a time when we were awesome, and that is currently not that time. But I don't think it's any of our faults, those of us who are living now, who have psychedelic potential within us, but can't manifest it because of the various structures and systems and money and all this stuff that's pressuring down on us. So I like to think about crux points, and I'm not sure that point when power decided to dominate in such a way that our liberty was less valuable than our labor, I guess, than our ability to push a rock and not be high. Because
now we just have to get rid of all of that.
I want to push rocks while I'm high. Hey there.
Now we have to dismantle all the structures.
Yeah. So this was my hope for the call, is that I would find a like-minded disciple in global pacification and psychedelic awakening.
Man,
how you doing? I think I just got a text. Something's wrong with the phone, so that's good. We don't need any callers. We can take callers. If you have questions, you can definitely call 1-866-10-666-3 to the hotline. But yeah. Oh my goodness. What is your, okay, hold on quickly. Let's just jump topics. Food. So you're a chef, like how
No,
How
okay.
psychedelic is food? Just give me a little bit of what you're like digging into at culinary school.
So, huge common
Oh,
misconception. Not a chef. I work in the front of house and I do expediting, so I work closely with the chefs.
got
I'm
it.
actually studying to be a sommelier, so a wine expert. And I'm
Hot.
studying under our head sommelier at our restaurant right now. Fiance is a cook, and speaking of psychedelic food, we want to open a restaurant one day, and we're always, thinking of these crazy ideas like how can it feel like you're on a psychedelic in a restaurant. We just try and think of the food, and because my big thing with food is because a lot of people are like, okay, why would you do fine dining, why would you spend all this money on food, why would you try so hard on something you're just going to eat and it's going to be gone. And the way I think about it is,
Huh.
so food, like, so it comes from the earth and then you eat it and then it nourishes you and then that creates another part of you. Why would I not try and make it a most beautiful, eloquent, like, dance, like, for you to enjoy this? I I fell in love with fine dining because I just think it's beautiful, and I think it's crazy to take something that we just eat to survive and create it into something beautiful and just remind people that this is beautiful and this is turning into something beautiful inside of you so that you can continue breathing and you can continue surviving, like, so I have this whole full circle view of food and the reason I prefer fine dining and why I think it, sometimes you should go into a restaurant and enjoy this beautiful dance, and it's relatively expensive, but I think it's gorgeous to be able to give people that kind of hospitality and kind of bring this view to food that's more than just like cooking something and eating it because you need to. Um,
If your restaurant
but
needs a preacher, I do parties and bar mitzvahs and stuff, so I could totally.
that, we'll have you come
It's
over.
like a mariachi band and as well as prayer. Same.
Very happy prayer band.
Cool. Well, listen, I'm a disorganized religion. Do you mind if I say like some little summarizing prayer, and then if you also wanna add something?
No, I would love for you. I would
Okay,
love for you.
I'm gonna throw on some klezmer music. Um, So for those who joined in late, or not at all, or like who will join in the future, because the internet is a surprisingly psychedelic state. The internet was founded on fantastic psychedelic intentions. It was a space where we were supposed to be able to be fully disembodied and become one in a great mind state. And guess what? Now it's a place where we get in fights on Facebook, and it's just absolutely unsurprising because the world wants to make challenges for us. And those challenges can seem so difficult and surmounting that, dear Dad, many people find themselves locked into a singular decision that is the strongest decision they can make, but it's the last decision they're going to make. And while every human has the autonomy to make it, they often lose sight that we exist in a neural network. We exist in a glorious community, and the pain that an individual may need to relieve in killing themselves ripples, and causes so much pain and damage throughout a community. So, Dad, please help people find a way to voice the voices they feel they cannot voice. Give them the strength and the power. You created us in your image, and you haven't killed yourself yet, Dad. So no one is meant to kill themselves. And with such beautiful voices that you've given us and that we find in ourselves and in people around us, let's put as much of our energy as we can into ensuring the beautiful survival of as many of us as we can. Blah. Prayer.
Hey,
I don't know. I don't know how to pray. I don't know how to read the Bible. I don't know how to do any of this stuff. I'm trying. I'm on
you
YouTube.
do I.
I'm on YouTube. Thank you for
Yeah, I'm on YouTube. I can do that.
thank you for taking my crazy email. I really I've been very excited. I've been very excited to speak to you, and this was exactly the conversation I wanted, and I really hope it will generate some good reflection and discussion either on the internet or IRL. Can you hear this music? Isn't this music awesome?
I do. I
Yeah. I feel like your dog wants to go for a walk.
My dog does need to go for a walk. He's being very annoying right now.
That's okay. That's okay. Cool. Well, if everyone would like to stay in touch, it is Twitter, RachaelMadori is how you find Rachel, and DJ Dirty Jesus, because I am a DJ of life and people's emotions. So listen, well, we'll stay in touch. Again, I'll help at your restaurant. I make really good peanut butter sandwiches.
Oh, good. That's my favorite
Yeah.
food, peanut butter.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks to everyone for watching, and thanks to Rachel. And what's the dog's name again?
Sasha.
Tasha?
Sasha.
Sasha. Okay. Okay. Sasha was like your cinematographer, I feel like.
Mr. Sasha.
She was moving the camera around. All right. Dog cam. Dog perspective. Cool. All right. Well, listen, you have the psychedelicest, loveliest of days. And whenever you have negative thoughts, know that it's just a mask. And if you can't break that mask, you have a hotline you can call.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye, Rachel.
Bye.
Okay. All right. Are we still streaming? We're still streaming. Cool. I guess if anyone wants to call in. No, I don't know if I feel like it. Maybe I'll come back later today or something. All right, let's crank this klezmer for a second. Oh. Do you guys think I'm okay at interviewing? This is my first interview with somebody I didn't know beforehand, but highly respected. You know, like, I'm trying here, internet. I'm trying my hardest to be a shepherd. But I keep scaring the sheep away. Not like metaphorical sheep, I mean literal sheep that are outside. They do not like interacting with me at all. They loathe me, in fact. But you don't loathe me, internet. We have a love relationship. So the phone lines are closed or open or whichever. The phone lines lead to a space where you can speak. And if I've derived anything from our conversation, of which I derived much, it's that I want to empower my disciples to find people in their lives who they are concerned about and who feel like they cannot get to speak, and try to offer them a place to speak out their thoughts, their ideations, their hopes, their fears, their worries, in the dream that sharing will relieve the tension inside people's brains. And that's what we want. We want to not be so under pressure all the time. Government, big pharma, whatever. Have a psychedelic day.